Every Thursday at 3:07 p.m., the devil brewed chamomile. Not for brimstone, not for bargains, for queens. Queens with crowns too heavy for ambition, and secrets too soft for scandal. They didn't scream. They whispered. Into velvet cushions, into haunted teacups, into the devil's ear, who, truth be told, preferred gossip over damnation. This is not a tale of fire and fury. It's a lullaby of lace and diplomacy, of monarchs who ruled with sighs and silken threats, a bedtime history of the women who bored hell into submission, one sleepy whisper at a time. So tuck yourself in, sip your sleepy tea, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and whisper in the comments where you were re-watching from. Lucifer Presser S dying to know if anyone tunes in from Drowsylvania. The queens arrived one by one, each more overdressed than the last. Queen Mildred, the unremarkable, wore 17 layers of beige lace and a crown that looked suspiciously like a bundt cake. She was followed by Queen Beatrice the Blunt, who carried a parasol made entirely of passive-aggressive compliments. They gathered in the infernal parlor, a room decorated in shades of mild disappointment and tax audit gray. Lucifer sat at the head of the table, swirling his tea and sighing dramatically. "Ladies," he said, "shall we begin the whispering?" Queen Mildred leaned in. Her voice was barely audible, like a moth apologizing. "Lucifer, the royal pigeons have unionized again. They demand dental." Lucifer blinked. He scribbled something in his planner, which was bound in the skin of expired coupons. Queen Beatrice whispered next. "The royal moat has developed feelings. It cried during the opera." Lucifer nodded solemnly. He added moat therapy to his to-do list. The whispers continued. Queen Petunia complained that her throne had started humming lullabies. Queen Hortensia suspected her mirror was judging her. Queen Daphne had written a poem so boring it caused a minor earthquake in the realm of the restless dead. Lucifer sipped his tea. It was lukewarm. Everything was lukewarm. Even the drama. "Ladies," he said, "I must confess, these whispers, they soothe me." The queens looked pleased. Mildred adjusted her bundt crown. Beatrice offered him a biscuit shaped like a sigh. And so it went, week after week, whisper after whisper. The devil, once feared and fiery, now spent his Thursdays wrapped in a blanket of royal complaints and sleepy diplomacy. Some say the whispers grew so dull, so profoundly boring, that hell itself began to nap. The flames flickered less. The screams softened. Even Cerberus, the three-headed hound, started snoring in harmony. Perhaps you too have felt the pull of the whisper, the gentle tug of a story that goes nowhere fast, the kind that wraps around your thoughts like a velvet fog and says, "Shh, it's time to sleep." Queen Beatrice the Blunt was not known for subtlety. Her compliments were like bricks wrapped in lace. "Your crown is ambitious. That dress is certainly present. You've aged like a fine cheese." Unexpectedly, and with a hint of mystery, every Thursday, after the whispering session, Beatrice stayed behind in the infernal parlor to knit. Not because she enjoyed it. She didn't. She found yarn judgmental. But she believed in tradition, and tradition believed in her. Lucifer, still sipping his chamomile, which now tasted faintly of existential dread, watched her knit with the slow intensity of someone trying to decode a prophecy from wool. "What are you making today?" he asked, already regretting it. "A scarf," Beatrice replied. "It spells out the downfall of 3 empires and a recipe for lemon scones. Lucifer blinked. The scarf was 17 feet long and mostly beige. Occasionally, a red stitch appeared, ominous, but also festive. Other queens joined in. Queen Petunia crocheted a blanket that hummed lullabies in Latin. Queen Hortensia attempted socks, but accidentally summoned a minor demon named Kevin, who now served tea and apologized profusely for existing. The infernal knitting circle became a weekly ritual. They stitched, they sighed, they whispered about the weather and the emotional state of their thrones. Lucifer tried to contribute once. He attempted a potholder. It came out as a sentient doily that recited tax codes in iambic pentameter. He never knitted again. Beatrice, he said one afternoon, do you think these scarves matter? Beatrice looked up, her needles clicking like judgment. Lucifer, everything matters, even the boring bits, especially the boring bits. That's where history naps. Lucifer nodded. He didn't understand, but he respected the vibe, and so the scarves grew longer. The whispers grew softer. The Devil IS planner, filled with notes like, ask Beatrice about sock prophecy, and Kevin needs a raise. Hell, once a place of torment and fire, now had a cozy corner where queens knitted destinies into wool, and Lucifer learned the value of a well-timed yawn. Lucifer, lord of paperwork and patron of mild discomfort, had one weakness: biscuits, not the fiery kind baked in the ovens of despair. No, he preferred the soft, crumbly ones that tasted like forgotten birthdays and slightly awkward hugs, the kind that left crumbs in your soul. Every Thursday, after the whispering and the knitting, the queens presented their offerings. Not gold, not jewels, just baked goods. It had become a tradition, like sighing dramatically or misplacing treaties. Queen Petunia specialized in shortbread, shaped like existential dread. Queen Hortensia baked ginger snaps that snapped back. Queen Daphne once made a cookie so bland it erased 3 minor prophecies. But it was Queen Esmeralda who dared to ask the forbidden question, Lucifer, what's your favorite biscuit? The room fell silent. Even Kevin, the apologetic demon butler, dropped a tray of haunted scones. Lucifer blinked. He hadn't been asked that in centuries, not since the Treaty of Crumbulence, when biscuit diplomacy nearly destroyed the realm of slightly toasted. I don't know, he whispered, voice trembling like a flan in a thunderstorm. The queens gasped. Mildred fainted into a pile of lemon wafers. Beatrice clutched her knitting and muttered, this is how empires fall. And so began the Great Biscuit War. Each queen vowed to bake the devil's favorite. They formed alliances, sabotaged ovens, and held secret tastings in the royal pantry. Queen Matilda invented a cookie that whispered compliments. Queen Bernadette created one that judged you silently. Lucifer, overwhelmed, started keeping a biscuit journal. It was bound in fondant and smelled faintly of regret. Today's biscuit was ambitious, texture, emotional, flavor, betrayal. Weeks passed. The infernal parlor overflowed with baked goods. Kevin developed frosting fatigue. The devil's planner was now 80% biscuit related. And then, one Thursday, Queen Esmeralda arrived with a single, humble biscuit. No sprinkles, no curses, just a quiet little round thing that smelled like bedtime and slightly damp libraries. Lucifer took a bite. He paused. He blinked. This, he whispered, tastes like peace. The queens gasped. Kevin wept. The biscuit was declared the official snack of Hell's Nap Division. And from that day forward, the whispering sessions ended with a single bite of Esmeralda's biscuit. The devil smiled more. The flames flickered less. Even the haunted teapot stopped judging people's posture. The whispering throne was not built. It was found, buried beneath the royal pantry, wedged between a jar of pickled regrets and a dusty scroll labeled Emergency Yawns. The throne had been quietly murmuring for centuries. No one noticed, because it mostly whispered things like, well, that's a choice. I wouldn't. But you do you. Queen Hortensia was the first to sit on it during a council meeting. She had misplaced her usual chair, which had wandered off in protest after being used as a hat rack. The moment she sat, the throne sighed. Oh, you again. Hortensia blinked. The council blinked. Lucifer, who had just arrived with his weekly chamomile and a biscuit shaped like mild disappointment, raised an eyebrow. Did the chair just sass you? He asked. It's whispering, Hortensia replied. Mostly critiques. It doesn't like my posture. The throne continued. Your crown is crooked. Your aura smells like unresolved tension. Also, you're sitting on a prophecy. Indeed, beneath the cushion was a faded parchment that read, When the throne speaks, the realm shall nap. Lucifer sipped his tea. He was already halfway to napping. The queens took turns sitting on the throne. Each received a different whisper. Queen Petunia, your shoes are ambitious. Your decisions less so. Queen Daphne, your poetry is a crime against rhythm. Queen Beatrice, you frighten me. In a good way. The throne became a regular guest at council meetings. It offered unsolicited advice, emotional critiques, and once, a recipe for melancholy muffins. Lucifer tried sitting on it once. The throne whispered, You're doing your best. It's adequate. He never sat again. Eventually, the throne was declared an honorary member of the Royal Advisory Board. It received a sash, a biscuit, and a weekly nap schedule. And so, the queens whispered to the devil whispered to his tea, and the throne whispered to everyone, slowly, judgmentally, and with the kind of energy that makes you want to lie down and rethink your life choices. Queen Hortensia was tired, not the dramatic kind of tired that inspires poetry or fainting spells. No, she was the kind of tired that made her forget why she entered rooms, misplace her crown in the soup, and once declare war on a neighboring kingdom because their flag looked a bit too awake. She didn't want power. She wanted pillows. And so, one Thursday, after whispering to the devil about the emotional instability of her royal curtains, she stood up, slowly, and declared, I am starting a rebellion, a sleepy one. No shouting, no marching, just naps. Lucifer blinked. Kevin the demon butler dropped a tray of existential eclairs. Queen Beatrice muttered, Finally. The rebellion began immediately. Hortensia issued a royal decree. All meetings shall be held in bed. Pajamas are mandatory. Anyone caught being alert will be gently escorted to the nap chamber. The kingdom transformed overnight. The royal guards swapped armor for bathrobes. The treasury was converted into a pillow fort. The national anthem was replaced with a soothing hum in D minor. Lucifer, intrigued, attended one of Hortensia's rebel councils. He arrived wearing a velvet onesie and carrying a mug that said, World S-okayest Overlord. The council was held in a blanket nest. Queen Petunia was already snoring. Queen Daphne was composing a lullaby about tax reform. Queen Esmeralda was crocheting a sleep mask that whispered affirmations. Hortensia, Lucifer said, this rebellion, it's oddly effective. Of course, she replied, sipping warm milk. Sleep is the ultimate protest. Against noise, against chaos, against chairs with opinions. Lucifer nodded. He felt drowsy. The rebellion was working. Soon, other realms took notice. The kingdom of perpetual alarm tried to invade, but fell asleep at the border. The empire of overachievement sent a strongly worded letter, which was used as a coaster for chamomile tea. Even hell began to soften. The flames dimmed. The screams became sighs. Cerberus wore slippers, and Queen Hortensia, wrapped in a blanket of quiet triumph, whispered to the devil, one last time, let the world burn. Softly, Lucifer had many titles: Lord of Paperwork, Keeper of Mild Discomfort, and Champion of Chamomile. But he had one fatal flaw. He refused to admit he needed reading glasses. He squinted at scrolls. He misread treaties. He once mistook a royal invitation for a recipe and sent a fruitcake to the kingdom of eternal grievance. War was narrowly avoided. The fruitcake was not. One Thursday, as the queens gathered for their weekly whispering, Lucifer arrived looking particularly confused. His planner was upside down. His biscuit was shaped like a question mark. Kevin the demon butler whispered, he's raw-dogging reality again. Queen Beatrice leaned in. Lucifer, are you reading without assistance? Nonsense, he replied, blinking at a teacup like it owed him money. My vision is infernally sharp. Queen Petunia handed him a scroll. He read aloud. The ducks demand sovereignty and a moat of their own. The room fell silent. Lucifer, Beatrice said gently, that scroll is a recipe for lemon scones. Lucifer blinked. The ducks, who had been peacefully waddling in the courtyard, suddenly began organizing. They wore tiny crowns. One had a monocle. Oh no, he whispered. I've accidentally declared independence for poultry. The queens sprang into action. Queen Hortensia drafted a treaty using invisible ink. Queen Daphne composed a lullaby to soothe the ducks. Queen Esmeralda crocheted a tiny flag that said, let's all calm down. Meanwhile, Lucifer tore apart the infernal parlor looking for his glasses. He found a cursed spoon, a sock full of secrets, and Kevin's memoir. Chapter 1. I apologize for existing. Finally, beneath a pile of expired prophecies, he found them. His reading glasses. Bent, dusty, slightly haunted. He put them on. The world sharpened. The ducks stopped marching. The scone recipe no longer looked like a manifesto. I can see, he whispered, and I regret everything. The queens nodded. They'd seen this before. Vision was a dangerous thing in politics. From that day forward, Lucifer wore his glasses proudly. He added optical clarity to his list of infernal virtues. The ducks were given honorary citizenship and a pond with mood lighting. And every Thursday, before the whispering began, Queen Beatrice would ask, Lucifer, are you wearing your glasses? Yes, he'd reply, and I still can't read emotions. Queen Petunia had a problem. It wasn't war. It wasn't scandal. It wasn't even the haunted spoon that kept stirring her tea counterclockwise. No, her problem was the weather. It was always fine. Not sunny, not stormy, just eternally overcast with a 12% chance of emotional drizzle. The kind of weather that made you sigh for no reason and consider reorganizing your sock drawer. Petunia suspected a curse. She had ruled for 47 years, and not once had it rained with conviction. Lightning refused to strike. Snow arrived apologetically and melted before breakfast. Lucifer, she whispered one Thursday. I think the sky is mocking me. Lucifer, sipping his chamomile and wearing a scarf that muttered compliments, nodded solemnly. Petunia, your kingdom is trapped in meteorological mediocrity, a fate worse than humidity. The other queens chimed in. Queen Hortensia, my realm has fog that critiques my decisions. Queen Daphne, my clouds write poetry. It's dreadful. Queen Beatrice, my weather is emotionally unavailable. Petunia decided to act. She summoned the Royal Weather Council, which consisted of Sir Gust, who once sneezed a tornado, Lady Drizzle, who cried during sunsets, Baron Umbrella, who was technically a hat. They examined the skies. They poked clouds. They interviewed the sun. It declined to comment. Finally, they discovered the truth. A centuries-old curse had been placed on Petunia's realm by a disgruntled sorcerer who disliked dramatic forecasts. The curse read, let the skies be forever met. May no picnic be ruined, and no poem be inspired. Petunia was furious. Mildly, she marched to the infernal parlor, dragging the cursed scroll behind her like a passive-aggressive cape. Lucifer, she declared, I demand weather with feelings. Lucifer blinked. He summoned the Department of Infernal Atmospherics. They arrived in a cloud of bureaucracy and offered her 3 choices: eternal sunshine with mild existential dread, thunderstorms that apologize after each strike, a rotating schedule of dramatic weather paired with mood lighting. Petunia chose option 3. The next morning, her kingdom awoke to a sunrise so dramatic it won an award. Rain fell in slow motion. Lightning struck with flare. The clouds wept tears of joy and confusion. Picnics were ruined. Poems were inspired. The haunted spoon stirred with purpose. And Petunia, standing beneath a rainbow that whispered compliments, smiled for the first time in decades. Finally, she said, a forecast worth ruling. Queen Daphne the Drowsy was attending the weekly whispering session in the infernal parlor. She had just finished reciting a poem titled Ode to Mild Regret, which was so boring it caused Kevin the demon butler to briefly forget how to stand. Lucifer, sipping his chamomile and wearing a robe embroidered with the phrase, I'm not mad, just eternally disappointed, nodded politely. The room was quiet, too quiet. And then it happened. Daphne yawned. Not a polite, hand-over-mouth yawn. No, this was a full-bodied, soul-stretching, jaw-unhinging yawn that echoed like a prophecy through the velvet halls of hell. The flames flickered. The walls sighed. A nearby tapestry depicting the fall of man gently fell asleep. Lucifer blinked. Did you just yawn a portal into the realm of eternal napping? Queen Beatrice adjusted her knitting. That wasn't a yawn. That was a diplomatic incident. The yawn rippled outward. In the kingdom of slightly too loud, bells stopped ringing. In the empire of over-explanation, footnotes fell silent. Even Cerberus, the 3-headed hound, curled up and began snoring in 3-part harmony. Lucifer summoned the Infernal Emergency Council. They arrived wearing pajamas and carrying clipboards made of sleep. We've never seen a yawn of this magnitude, said Sir Snoozington, head of somnolent affairs. It's classified as a level 7 drowsolypse. Queen Daphne, unaware of the chaos, was now gently humming a lullaby to her biscuit. Lucifer paced, slowly, dramatically. We must contain this. If the yawn spreads to the Bureau of Eternal Screaming, we'll have to rename it the Bureau of Mild Whimpering. The Queens proposed solutions. Queen Petunia suggested a nap treaty. Queen Hortensia offered a blanket embargo. Queen Esmeralda crocheted a containment net made of sleepy affirmations. In the end, it was Kevin who saved the day. He brewed a tea so soothing, so profoundly boring, that it neutralized the yawn's ripple effect. It was called Sleepy Earl, and it tasted like beige. Lucifer sipped it. The flames steadied. The tapestry woke up, apologized, and went back to sleep. Well, he said, that was exhausting. Queen Daphne blinked. Did I miss something? Once a year, Lucifer took a break from brimstone, bureaucracy, and biscuit diplomacy to indulge in his greatest guilty pleasure. Spa Day. Not just any spa. The Infernal Spa and Whisper Lounge, located beneath the royal pantry and adjacent to the Department of Mild Regret. It was run by Queen Matilda's cousin, Lady Lavender, who specialized in massages that released emotional baggage and facials that whispered affirmations. Lucifer arrived wearing his velvet robe, embroidered with the phrase, "I'm hell, but make it cozy." Kevin the demon butler carried his towel, his planner, and a small jar labeled emergency peppermint. The queens had prepared everything. Queen Petunia curated the playlist, 12 hours of ambient sighs and distant harp confusion. Queen Beatrice mixed the mud bath, equal parts volcanic ash and passive-aggressive compliments. Queen Daphne brewed the tea, a sleepy blend called Chamomile of the Damned. Lucifer reclined on a chaise lounge, made of haunted goose feathers. Lady Lavender approached with a clipboard and a smile that had seen things. Your treatment today includes a soul soak, a guilt scrub, and a whisper wrap, she said. Would you like the optional existential steam? Yes, Lucifer replied. Make it extra meaningless. The queens gathered to assist. Queen Hortensia applied the guilt scrub, gently exfoliating centuries of questionable decisions. Queen Esmeralda crocheted a towel that hummed lullabies. Queen Bernadette read aloud from the book of slightly embarrassing memories to help Lucifer purge his pride. At one point, the devil's horns were wrapped in cucumber slices. He sighed deeply. This is the closest I've come to inner peace since the Treaty of Misunderstood Intentions. Kevin wept softly in the corner. The steam room whispered, You're doing your best. The mud bath burped. And then came the final treatment, the whisper wrap. Each queen took turns, whispering affirmations into a blanket woven from forgotten dreams and mildly cursed wool. You are enough, said Queen Petunia. Your chaos is symmetrical, said Queen Daphne. Your eyebrows are powerful, said Queen Beatrice. Lucifer melted, not literally, just emotionally. By the end of the day, hell was quieter. The flames flickered with spa-like serenity. Cerberus wore a towel turban. The infernal planner had a new section labeled Self-Care. Lucifer stood, glowing faintly with moisturized malevolence. Thank you, queens, he said. I feel moisturally reborn. Queen Esmeralda was known for two things: her ability to crochet anything, including diplomatic documents and emotional support doilies. Her teapot, Gerald. Gerald was haunted, not in the dramatic scream-in-the-night kind of way. No, Gerald was haunted by a ghost with strong opinions and a background in etiquette. He had once been a butler in the kingdom of over-politeness, where he died tragically during a duel over napkin folding. Now, as a teapot, Gerald whispered critiques. This Earl Grey is emotionally flat. You steeped me like a barbarian. Your posture is offensive to porcelain. Every Thursday, Queen Esmeralda brought Gerald to the infernal parlor. The other queens tolerated him. Kevin the demon butler feared him. Lucifer tried to ignore him. Gerald, Lucifer said one afternoon, can we have one tea session without commentary? Only if you stop stirring with a cursed spoon, Gerald replied. It's summoning passive-aggressive spirits. Queen Beatrice found Gerald amusing. She once asked him to rate her biscuit. Crumb structure, bold. Flavor, emotionally distant. Presentation, tragic. Queen Petunia tried to exercise him with a napkin. Gerald critiqued her folding technique and refused to leave. Eventually, Gerald became part of the ritual. The queens whispered to the devil. The devil whispered to his planner. Gerald whispered to everyone's self-esteem. One Thursday, Gerald went silent. Esmeralda poured tea. No critique, no sigh. Just silence. Lucifer blinked. Is he broken? Queen Daphne leaned in. Maybe he's finally at peace. Suddenly, Gerald spoke. I was listening. For once, the tea was adequate. The room gasped. Kevin fainted. The haunted spoon stirred itself in celebration. From that day forward, Gerald was treated with reverence. He received a tiny crown, a saucer throne, and a weekly compliment from Queen Hortensia. Lucifer, sipping his tea, smiled. Gerald, you are a menace, but you make Thursdays interesting. Gerald burbled modestly. The weekly whispering sessions had devolved into biscuit flinging, passive-aggressive knitting, and one unfortunate incident involving Queen Bernadette and a spoon duel. The infernal parlor was in chaos. Kevin the demon butler had started wearing noise-canceling earmuffs made of regret. So Lucifer did what any mildly exhausted overlord would do. He opened a school, not for sorcery, not for strategy, for etiquette. Welcome, he announced, to the Devil's Etiquette School for Wayward Monarchs. Motto, if you must curse, do it with grace. The queens were skeptical. Queen Beatrice, I already curse with flair. Queen Hortensia, I once insulted a diplomat using only eyebrow movements. Queen Daphne, I wrote a poem that offended 3 continents. Lucifer insisted. The curriculum was mandatory. Kevin handed out syllabi printed on parchment that smelled faintly of judgment. Course offerings, forks. Which one summons doom? Spoiler, it's the salad fork. Never trust it. Napkin folding for emotional warfare. Queen Petunia folded hers into a passive-aggressive swan. How to exit a room without causing a treaty violation. Queen Esmeralda practiced by vanishing into a crocheted curtain. The art of the whispered insult. Lucifer demonstrated, your crown is bold, your decisions less so. The queens took notes, slowly, dramatically. Queen Bernadette used a quill dipped in lukewarm tea. Queen Matilda annotated her scroll with sleepy doodles of judgmental biscuits. Lucifer held office hours. He wore a monocle and a cape that whispered, posture matters. Kevin served tea that apologized for being lukewarm. One day, Queen Daphne submitted a poem titled Elegy for a Fork. It was so well-mannered, it received a standing ovation from the haunted teapot, Gerald. Lucifer was pleased. You've all come so far, he said. You now insult with elegance. You threaten with charm. You've weaponized etiquette. The queens curtsied. The napkins folded themselves. The salad fork glowed ominously. And so, the infernal etiquette school became a permanent fixture. Diplomats trembled. Treaties were signed with flair. Even Cerberus learned to bow before barking. Lucifer added a new title to his planner. Dean of Decorum, Lord of Lace, Whisperer of Table Manners. Queen Daphne believed in the power of words. Unfortunately, words did not believe in her. Every Thursday, after the whispering and before the biscuit diplomacy, she hosted poetry hour in the infernal parlor. Attendance was mandatory. Escape was frowned upon. Kevin the demon butler once tried to hide inside a teacup. He was found. The teacup was traumatized. Lucifer, sipping his chamomile and wearing a scarf that muttered, "I regret everything," braced himself. Today's poem, Daphne announced, is titled Ode to a Slightly Damp Sock. The room tensed. The haunted teapot. Gerald whimpered. Queen Beatrice clutched her knitting like a shield. Daphne began, "O sock, thou art moist with mystery, a fabric of forgotten footfall. Thy scent, an echo of ambition. Thy texture, a betrayal of cotton." Lucifer blinked. The flames of hell flickered. One of Cerberus's heads fell asleep mid-snarl. Queen Petunia whispered, "This is how dimensions collapse." Daphne continued, "Thou clingest to the ankle of fate, a limp embrace of destiny's arch. Thy heel, worn like ancient prophecy. Thy toe, an abyss of lint and longing." Kevin fainted. The curtains wept. A nearby scroll spontaneously unrolled itself in protest. Lucifer stood. "Daphne," he said gently, "your poetry, it's a weapon." "Thank you," she replied, beaming. "I call it emotional erosion." The queens proposed solutions. Queen Esmeralda crocheted a poetry filter. Queen Hortensia suggested limiting verses to 3 lines and 1 sigh. Queen Bernadette offered to translate the poems into silence. Lucifer created a new department, the Bureau of Literary Containment. Its mission, prevent poetic fallout and monitor metaphor density. Despite the chaos, Daphne's poetry hour remained a fixture. Her verses were used to lull restless spirits, confuse invading diplomats, and once to neutralize a cursed salad fork. Lucifer added a new title to her royal scroll: Queen of Verse, Duchess of Drowsy Stanzas, Bard of Bewilderment. And every Thursday, as the infernal parlor braced for another recital, Gerald the teapot whispered, "At least it's not haiku." Deep beneath the infernal parlor, past the hall of forgotten biscuits and the chamber of mildly cursed footwear, stood the whispering wall of regret. It was not built. It simply appeared one day, sighing softly and muttering things like, "You shouldn't have worn that hat. Remember that thing you said in 2003? So does everyone. You could have been a pastry chef." Queen Bernadette discovered it while searching for her missing monocle, which had wandered off to pursue a career in interpretive dance. She leaned against the wall and heard it whisper, "You once called a diplomat, sir, when he was clearly a lord." "Shame," she gasped. The wall knew. Word spread quickly. The queens gathered, each curious and mildly terrified. Queen Petunia brought a biscuit offering. Queen Daphne wrote a poem titled Ode to My Most Awkward Moment. Queen Beatrice brought a folding chair and a list. Lucifer arrived wearing his regret management robe and sipping a tea called Remorseberry Blend. He approached the wall cautiously. "Wall," he said, "what do you remember about me?" The wall whispered, "You once tried to flirt using tax metaphors. It did not go well." Lucifer blinked. Kevin the demon butler snorted into his sleeve. The queens took turns listening. The wall whispered regrets, missteps, and emotionally confusing fashion choices. Queen Hortensia, "You once declared war on a mirror." Queen Esmeralda, "You crocheted a treaty that accidentally summoned a goose." Queen Daphne, "Your poetry once caused a nap riot." The wall never judged loudly. It simply whispered, gently nudging each queen into a spiral of sleepy self-reflection. Eventually, the wall became part of the weekly ritual. After whispering to the devil, the queens would whisper to the wall, offering apologies, confessions, and occasionally snacks. Lucifer added a new department to Hell's bureaucracy, the Office of Whispered Regret Management, staffed entirely by ghosts who once made poor career choices. And so, the whispering wall stood quietly, reminding everyone that history is just a collection of sighs, mispronounced titles, and questionable hats. Lucifer had a pet, not a dragon, not a raven, not a three-headed goat that recited legal disclaimers. No, Lucifer had a snail. His name was Harold. Harold was ancient, mildly cursed, and moved with the urgency of a sigh. He wore a tiny crown made of thimble fragments and carried a scroll on his back that read, "I'll get there eventually." Every Thursday, Harold attended the whispering sessions. He arrived precisely 47 minutes late, having traversed the hallway from Lucifer's chamber to the infernal parlor at a pace best described as existential. Queen Beatrice adored him. She knitted him a scarf that trailed behind like a royal decree. Queen Petunia baked him biscuits shaped like leaves. Queen Daphne wrote him a poem titled Ode to a Slime Trail, which was banned in 3 realms for being too moist. Lucifer loved Harold. He claimed the snail was his emotional support mollusk. "Harold listens," he said. "He never judges. He just glides." One Thursday, the queens proposed a race. Not for speed, for style. Harold versus Gerald, the haunted teapot. The course, a velvet runway lined with sighs and faint applause. The prize, a crown made of biscuit crumbs and mild admiration. The race began. Harold moved, slowly, dramatically. Gerald rolled, elegantly. Kevin the demon butler provided commentary in a whisper so soft it was legally considered a nap. 3 weeks later, Harold crossed the finish line. Gerald had stopped halfway to critique the lighting. Lucifer declared Harold the winner. "He may be slow," he said, "but he's consistent." Like regret, Harold burbled modestly. The queens cheered. The haunted spoon wept. Cerberus wore a Harold fan shirt. From that day forward, Harold was given a seat at the royal table. He whispered once, very softly, "I liked the biscuits." Lucifer added a new title to his planner: Keeper of the Snail, Lord of Leisurely Loyalty, Patron of Pacing. Queen Bernadette was bored. Not the kind of boredom that inspires hobbies or light rebellion. No, this was the deep, yawning boredom of a monarch who had already alphabetized her regrets and taught her throne to play dead. So, she invented Infernal Bingo Night. Lucifer was skeptical. "Bingo?" he asked, sipping his chamomile. "Isn't that a gateway to chaos?" "Exactly," Bernadette replied, "but with prizes." The infernal parlor was transformed. Velvet tablecloths, candles that flickered in Morse code, and bingo cards printed on parchment that occasionally bit the players. Kevin the demon butler wore a bow tie and carried a tray of haunted daiquiris. Each square on the bingo card was a royal misstep. Declared war by accident, misplaced crown in soup, summoned goose during treaty, complimented enemy's hat too aggressively. Lucifer sat at the head table, wearing his "I regret everything" sash. Queen Petunia brought her lucky biscuit. Queen Daphne wrote a poem on her card instead of marking it. Queen Esmeralda crocheted her dauber. The game began. Bernadette called out, "B13. Forgot own title during coronation?" Queen Hortensia gasped. "That was me. I called myself Duchess of Slightly Confused. Lucifer marked his card. I once signed a treaty as Lucifer Nando. It was a phase. The prizes were questionable. A crown made of biscuit crumbs. A scroll that whispered compliments in Latin. A footstool with opinions. Queen Beatrice won the first round. Her prize, a monocle that judged silently. She wore it proudly. Then came the blackout round. Full regret bingo. Queen Daphne won by accident. Her card was blank, but her poem had caused 3 minor hauntings and a diplomatic nap. Lucifer stood. Bernadette, this is madness. It's organized madness, she replied, with snacks. The haunted teapot Gerald called the final number, G66, forgot to attend own rebellion. Queen Bernadette shouted, bingo, and claimed the grand prize, a throne cushion that hummed lullabies and occasionally wept. Infernal bingo night became a weekly tradition. The queens whispered. The devil sighed. Kevin kept score. The cards occasionally bit back. Queen Petunia had just offered Queen Beatrice a scone shaped like a diplomatic compromise. Beatrice, unsure whether it was a compliment or a trap, blinked. Petunia blinked back. Neither spoke. Lucifer, sipping his chamomile and wearing a cloak that whispered, I'm not getting involved, watched the silence stretch. Kevin, the demon butler, dropped a teacup. No one reacted. The haunted spoon stirred itself nervously. The silence continued. Queen Daphne tried to break it with a poem titled Ode to a Pause, but the parchment caught fire out of sheer discomfort. Finally, Queen Hortensia stood and declared, This is unbearable. We need a treaty. Thus was born the Treaty of Slightly Awkward Silence, drafted in the infernal parlor, using ink made from unspoken feelings and printed on parchment that cringed slightly. The treaty outlined the rules for managing royal awkwardness. Key provisions. If 2 monarchs blink at each other for more than 6 seconds, a biscuit must be offered as a peace gesture. All uncomfortable silences must be acknowledged with a polite cough or a dramatic sigh. If a silence lasts longer than 1 teacup steeping, it becomes legally binding and must be recorded in the Book of Mutual Avoidance. The Haunted Teapot. Gerald is authorized to break silence with a judgmental whistle if necessary. Lucifer signed the treaty using a quill dipped in second-hand embarrassment. Kevin notarized it while wearing earmuffs made of tension. The treaty was immediately tested. Queen Bernadette accidentally complimented Queen Esmeralda's crown in a tone that sounded like sarcasm. Silence fell. Gerald whistled. A biscuit was thrown. The treaty held. From that day forward, the infernal parlor operated under the treaty's guidance. Awkward silences were catalogued, ranked, and occasionally framed. The longest one, clocking in at 47 minutes, was between Lucifer and a mirror that looked too much like his ex. Lucifer added a new department to Hell S bureaucracy, the Office of Social Pauses and Biscuit-Based Conflict Resolution. And so, the queens whispered. The devil blinked. The silences stretched, softened, and became part of the rhythm of royal diplomacy. Queen Matilda was restless, not politically, not emotionally, textilely. Her royal pajamas, stitched from diplomatic velvet and embroidered with the Treaty of Mild Discomfort, were no longer enough. They itched with ambition. They whispered too loudly. One sleeve kept trying to negotiate trade deals in its sleep. I need new pajamas, Matilda declared one Thursday, mid-whisper, ones that say, I rule with softness and a hint of existential dread. Lucifer, sipping his chamomile, and wearing his usual robe that muttered, "Not today," nodded solemnly. "A noble quest," he said. "But beware, the perfect pajamas are guarded by the tailor of forgotten promises." Queen Beatrice raised an eyebrow. "Isn't he the one who stitched a cloak that made a diplomat cry for 3 fiscal quarters?" "Yes," Lucifer replied. "It was cashmere and emotional." Matilda set off on her quest. She visited the realm of eternal flannel, where the fabric was warm but emotionally clingy. She consulted the silken oracle, who whispered, "Try linen, but only if you've made peace with your past." She briefly considered haunted fleece, but it kept reciting bedtime regrets. Back in the infernal parlor, the queens hosted a pajama summit. Each presented their sleepwear. Queen Petunia wore a biscuit print onesie that crumbled slightly with every sigh. Queen Daphne wore a nightgown made of rejected poetry. It rhymed in its sleep. Queen Esmeralda crocheted a pajama set that hummed lullabies and occasionally judged your dreams. Matilda returned triumphant. Her pajamas were stitched from emotional neutrality, lined with diplomatic softness, and enchanted to dim the lights when she blinked twice. The buttons whispered affirmations. The cuffs negotiated bedtime extensions. Lucifer wept softly. "They're perfect," he said. "They say, I'm powerful, but I nap." The haunted spoon stirred in approval. Kevin the demon butler fainted from coziness. Cerberus curled up and requested a matching set. Matilda was crowned Queen of Comfort, Duchess of Drowsy Couture, Empress of Elastic Waistbands. And every Thursday, as the queens whispered and the devil sipped his tea, Matilda reclined in her perfect pajamas, ruling softly, stylishly, and with just enough existential flair. Lucifer was brooding. Not his usual brand of brooding, the kind that pairs well with chamomile and a haunted planner. No, this was deeper, existential, velvet adjacent. He stared into the infernal mirror of self-doubt, which whispered things like, "You peaked during the Treaty of Mild Regret. Your horns are uneven. You should have taken that sabbatical in the realm of unfinished dreams." Kevin, the demon butler, noticed the signs. Lucifer had started journaling in scented ink. He'd renamed his planner Lucifer's Spiral of Maybe. He'd ordered a velvet cape in crimson, with a collar that could legally be classified as dramatic. The queens gathered for an emergency whispering session. Queen Petunia. "He's wearing eyeliner. It's smudged with intention." Queen Beatrice. "He complimented my crown, and then sighed for 7 minutes." Queen Daphne. "He wrote a poem, titled Ode to My Former Flame. It rhymed with shame." Lucifer entered the infernal parlor, wearing the cape. It billowed. It judged. It whispered affirmations in Latin. "I am reborn," he declared. "I am velvet." "The haunted teapot," Gerald muttered. "This again?" Harold the snail blinked slowly. The cape flared dramatically and knocked over a bowl of diplomatic biscuits. Queen Esmeralda crocheted a crisis net. Queen Hortensia drafted a velvet intervention. Queen Bernadette hosted a fashion show titled Capes and Emotional Recovery. Lucifer strutted. The cape glowed. Kevin fainted. But then, during the final walk, the cape whispered, "You're compensating." Lucifer froze. The room fell silent. Even Cerberus stopped chewing his existential chew toy. Lucifer sighed. "I just wanted to feel relevant." Queen Petunia offered him a biscuit shaped like self-acceptance. Queen Daphne read a poem titled You're Still You. but softer. Queen Beatrice adjusted his collar and said, "You're dramatic, but you're ours." Lucifer removed the cape. It folded itself and wept softly. He returned to his chamomile, his planner, and his throne of mild discomfort. The velvet cape was framed and hung in the infernal parlor with a plaque that read, "Lucifer S. Crisis, bold, billowy, brief." It began with a whisper, not a dramatic one, not a prophecy, just a soft, sleepy murmur from Queen Daphne during a Thursday session. "Time is just a suggestion." Lucifer blinked. His planner trembled. Kevin the demon butler dropped a tray of punctuality-themed biscuits. The whisper echoed through the infernal parlor, curling around the velvet drapes, slipping into the cracks of reality, and finally, inevitably, nestling inside Lucifer's calendar. The calendar, known formally as the chrono ledger of infernal appointments, was bound in regret and updated hourly by a team of time-sensitive ghosts. It tracked everything: biscuit diplomacy at 3:07 p.m., emotional spirals at 4:12 p.m., existential sighing at sunset. But after Daphne's whisper, the calendar unraveled. Appointments began rearranging themselves. Tuesday declared itself a nap. Thursday stretched into a philosophical pause. One entire week was replaced with the phrase, "Let's not." Lucifer stared at the chaos. "I had a treaty signing at 2 p.m. It's now listed as maybe." Queen Petunia checked her own schedule. It simply said, "Wear something soft." Queen Beatrice's planner had turned into a poem. Meetings fade, intentions blur. Let's reschedule the concept of sure. Kevin tried to restore order. He summoned the Bureau of Temporal Stability. They arrived late, confused, and wearing mismatched socks. The haunted teapot, Gerald offered a solution. Replace the calendar with a mood board. Lucifer considered it. He was already wearing his "I'm not sure what day it is" robe. Queen Esmeralda crocheted a new planner. It pulsed gently and whispered things like, "You're doing fine. Time is a construct. So is your crown. Have a biscuit." Eventually, the infernal calendar was retired. It was framed and hung in the parlor with a plaque that read, "Here lies structure." It had a good run. Lucifer added a new department to Hell S bureaucracy, the Office of Flexible Intentions and Soft Deadlines. And every Thursday, whenever that happened, the queens whispered, the devil sighed, and time flowed like lukewarm tea, gently, confusingly, and with a hint of rebellion. It began with a whisper, not a political whisper, not a poetic one, just a soft, sleepy murmur from Queen Hortensia as she reclined on her throne of emotional neutrality. What if we all just rested? Lucifer paused mid-sip. His chamomile blinked. Kevin the demon butler dropped a tray of bedtime biscuits, shaped like unresolved feelings. The infernal parlor fell silent. Queen Petunia nodded slowly. Queen Daphne yawned in iambic pentameter. Queen Esmeralda crocheted a blanket that whispered yes. The haunted teapot Gerald burbled in agreement. Harold the snail stopped mid-glide and curled into a motivational spiral. Lucifer stood. "Then let it be known," he declared, "that today marks the beginning of the great royal nap." The treaty of slightly awkward silence was folded into a pillow. The infernal calendar sighed and erased itself. Even Cerberus put on his sleepy slippers and curled up beside the throne. The queens gathered in the parlor, each wrapped in their finest pajamas. Queen Matilda wore her diplomatic flannel, Queen Bernadette donned a robe stitched from bingo cards and bedtime victories. Queen Beatrice wore a nightcap that hummed lullabies in Latin. Lucifer dimmed the flames of hell to a cozy flicker. He placed his planner on the shelf, next to the velvet cape and the scroll of slightly misunderstood intentions. Then he whispered, "We've ruled, we've rebelled, we've whispered. Now, we rest." The great royal nap began. Time paused. Treaties softened. The haunted spoon stirred one last time and fell asleep in a bowl of warm milk. The infernal parlor glowed with quiet magic. The queen snored in harmony. Gerald steeped himself. Kevin finally exhaled. And Lucifer, Lord of Chamomile and keeper of cozy catastrophes, closed his eyes beneath a blanket of bureaucratic dreams. The saga ends not with a bang, but with a yawn, a whisper, a nap. Thank you for joining this sleepy, biscuit-laced journey through diplomacy, poetry, haunted kitchenware, and velvet crises. Good night. May your dreams be mildly dramatic and your pajamas emotionally supportive.